Hello and welcome to the F1 Word Live again and the Hungarian Grand Prix race debrief. How are we all doing in chat? Probably only just spoken to most of you. It was live an hour ago with the race watch along, as I'm sure you'll remember. What do we think to the Grand Prix? It was tense in some ways, interesting in others, but it wasn't a thriller. I think we can accept that until probably about maybe 10 laps from the end or something like that. But we're going to get into all of that in just a moment. Just a quick heads up, if you are new around here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We are on the brink of the biggest day the channel's had in terms of views and subs and all sorts that just ever. So if you are new, do hit that sub button. Don't forget to hit like as well if you're enjoying the stream at any point. But there you go. So we'll kick off with the race result as we always do when we look at these streams. It was Lewis Hamilton who took victory for Mercedes. Again, quite surprising. Not so much that, Mercedes won a race, but in Hungary. Coming into this weekend, there was no real expectation from them or us that they were going to do particularly well. But there they are with the victory, comfortable in the end, I think it's fair to say. Sebastian Vettel came home in second place for reasons we will go over a little bit later on. Of course, Kimi Raikkonen in third, Daniel Ricciardo, great recovery from him. We'll talk about him a little bit later as well. He finished in fourth. Valtteri Bottas only in fifth place. Yes, if you watch the race live, you'll know fully well why. But again, we will talk about that a little bit later. That's kind of the point of a race debrief. Pierre Gasly in P6, brilliant from him. Kevin Magnussen 7th. Alonso recovered well to 8th. Carlos Sainz probably very disappointed with 9th place. Romain Grosjean, he took 10th. Doesn't really tell the full story of his race. He dropped back a little bit, but it does still confirm really started 10th and finished 10th. Brendan Hartley, 11th place for him. I said after the watch along, wasn't sure how he'd feel. Maybe fairly happy with that given how his season's gone, but just outside the points. Nico Hulkenberg, definitely a disappointing day for Renault. He ended up in 12th. Esteban Ocon, not Pierre Gasly. Esteban Ocon was 13th for Force India with Sergio Perez just behind him in 14th. Marcus Ericsson, bit of ping pong on the first lap. He ended up 15th. The Williams boys of Sorokin and Stroll 16th and 17th. And your retirements list, Stoffel Van Dorn, Max Verstappen, not good, and Charles Leclerc. Well, I don't know what you guys reckoned in chat, but I'm going to kick off by saying good afternoon again, Jonty. And what did you think to that race, mate?
Well, I was worried for a while, and then all of a sudden, boom.
It all just really kicked off in the end, didn't it? And what did you think as well, Stuart? Good afternoon, mate, and welcome back.
Hello again. It was something, wasn't it? The last 10 laps were good. I actually enjoyed the first half because I really felt it was building to something, and then as soon as the pit stops happened, it turned out it wasn't building to anything. So, yeah, it was a race.
Yes, something happened at a racetrack, I think is what a lot of people maybe argue that was. I mean, we try and avoid saying boring, don't we, Jonty? I think it was just one of those races where it was all about strategy and just massively intriguing more than anything. It wasn't exciting until we got to those last few laps, really, was it?
It could have been. It was quite intriguing at the start, but I think it was around about 20, 25, something like that, where the track temperature just dropped. And all of a sudden, all the concerns and worries about tyres disappeared, and it just settled into a gentle pace.
I mean, we like to start at the start because that makes sense, and we like doing things as chronologically as we can. So that's where we are going to go. I saw your notes on Twitter, Jonty. Fantastic, by the way. That kind of summed it up quite nicely. But a little bit of ping pong in turn one between a few drivers, but all in all, nothing really happening start-wise. The only thing I can really think back and really pick out was that move by Verstappen on site. Super aggressive in turn one for the first lap.
Yeah, and he really had to go for it in that situation. But beyond that, the start didn't really have a lot apart from the Sauers getting bumped about a bit. Ericsson got things a little bit squirrely coming into turn one, and it could have been quite nasty, but they got off very lightly with those incidents, I think.
Yeah, we've seen in the past, haven't we, Stuart, that can sometimes end in big damage, but really, it was more a lot of sort of tyre war to tyre war, wasn't it, really, in the end?
Yeah, it was all a bit fair, a bit of bumping and barging, jostling for position. It's a narrow track, and at Hungary, often the first few corners might be your only chance to gain position. So you can see why people take a bit more space than they might at other tracks.
I know it didn't work out very well for him in the end, but how big was that move at the time, Stuart, for Max? I mean, it was an aggressive move on Sainz, and it felt to me watching it like he had to do that, get rid of Gasly and Sainz as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think taking the opportunity to get track position where you can, rather than get stuck behind him for the next stint, which is what so easily could have happened, as we saw later with Vettel, which I'm sure we'll cover. Yeah, I think you've got to be hard and you've got to be fast at the beginning to get yourself where you need to be. Otherwise, you could be in for a very painful afternoon.
I didn't see a lot of Kevin Magnussen on that first lap, but he made a solid start, 9th to 7th in the end, didn't he, Jonty? I mean, I say it with surprise, but the way Magnussen's been this year, it shouldn't be a surprise that he managed to make that jump and get himself some good points today.
Well, yeah, he's another one similar to Stroll that's been a very good first lap attacker, always making up at least a place or two. But I think he was just overshadowed with everyone trying to watch what Ricciardo was doing, see how they were scrapping up the front. So some of the really good moves that happened further down, we just kind of missed.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a theme this year, hasn't it? That anything outside the top 3 or 4 teams doesn't really get picked up on the live feed very well, which is a little bit annoying because obviously, as I said in the stream earlier, there's 20 cars on the grid, not just 6. You know, we want to see what everyone's doing. But I think I look at that result and, as I say at the start, it's a little bit surprising because Mercedes were not confident ahead of this weekend at all. And some people during the watch along were saying that Lewis got lucky. I think, do we put an element of luck in there, Stuart, do you think? Do you think it was kind of lucky, or was it just really good team play from Mercedes today?
I think it was a number of things. I think the weather on Saturday played a large hand into where they ended up at the end of today. I don't think Hamilton would have been on pole had it been dry yesterday. On the other hand, I'm sure this is something we'll get into. Vettel's strategy, kind of strange looking back at it, kind of strange, and didn't really put him in a position where he was able to attack. But I'm sure we'll get to there. But Hamilton drove a superb race. He was untouchable for almost every lap, so you can't really fault that.
He pretty much just he got the start that he needed, didn't he? And then just controlled everything from there. And I mean, in terms of strategy, talking about his strategy, I did not expect the Ultrasofts to go as far as that. Pirelli were kind of saying 22 laps, and he managed to take them another 4 or 5. And that, that's the advantage, I guess, of being out front in clean air, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is quite typical where Pirelli will say, our tyres will last 20 laps max, and then the drivers will take them 30 laps. I think Vettel, going on to an obviously different strategy, turned everybody into this one-stop sort of marathon of a race. Had Vettel started on the Ultrasoft with everyone else, we probably would have seen a 2-stop because everybody would have been in sync. But Mercedes were having to sort of keep their eye on Vettel and make sure he wasn't in a position where them taking an extra pit stop would have handed them the advantage.
I mean, strategy's kind of dominated the day, really, hasn't it? If we're being honest, until the last few laps, which I promise we will get to. We will come to that very shortly because that was probably the biggest talking points. But we'll talk about Ferrari's strategy, Jonty, because I was surprised big time when I was doing the watch along that Raikkonen pitted so early. Was that, looking back, it seems obvious now, but was that just him trying to get Bottas and Ferrari trying to get Bottas out of play effectively, trying to force him onto a 2-stopper to make things between Vettel and Hamilton?
I have no idea, to be quite honest. I do not know what they were thinking there, because it was never going to force Mercedes' hand fully. And it completely ruined Kimi's strategy. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's a very, very strange one.
I couldn't work it out. And then he pitted the second time quite early as well, didn't he?
Yeah, and it just compromised him far too much. I don't know why they would even think that. It really is an odd one. I mean, maybe they were thinking about getting him out of the way of Vettel because they're on the split strategies, but they just did it all completely wrong.
There was a lot of talk in the chat during the stream that he had his water bottle fitted at that point, but even so, I mean, what was it, 12 laps into the race, something like that? I mean, I'm not a racing driver. I don't know how much he needs to drink at that point. But 12 laps still seems very early even to put a water bottle in place. I didn't see anything of that in the pit stop, though. I don't know if either of you two have heard or seen anything on that.
I'm not sure if he did fit his water bottle. I didn't hear anything about that. I doubt they would have brought him in early just to do that. My feeling is, and we're sort of seeing this as a pattern across the season, is that Ferrari tend to use Raikkonen to goad Bottas into pitting to cover him. I think that the story of the season really between the two teams is that Raikkonen is a sort of willing number two, and Bottas is an unwilling number two, keeps getting dragged into the worst strategy just to cover off Raikkonen.
Yeah, you do feel a little bit sorry for Bottas in that respect, because if he wasn't having to mess around getting involved in these sort of race changing or controlling strategies, he'd be doing a lot better because he wouldn't be getting put in as many situations to get the bad luck.
Yeah, I feel for Bottas. We're going to talk about him in a moment. We'll stick with the strategy now and go on to Vettel's, because I thought he had it. I thought it was in the bag. When I saw him starting on the softs, I thought, keep that steady gap to Hamilton, but he didn't seem to have the pace initially on those softs. It did come to him towards the end of his stint. And then it all kind of fell apart when he came out behind Bottas. Slow pit stop as well, that needs to be pointed out. But even with the slow pit stop, I think, 1.4 seconds slower than it should have been, he probably would have still come out behind Bottas. He needed to be in 1 or 2 laps earlier, didn't he, Stuart? He really did.
Yeah, very much. Or, to be honest, a few laps later. Because those softs were not behaving in the way we thought they would. They were not degrading as fast as we thought they would. And actually, he was pretty competitive to Hamilton's lap times, even though his tyres were 25, 26 laps older. The thing that brought Hamilton closer to him, Hamilton and Bottas, was him getting stuck in traffic. And then, of course, the problem with the pit stop. And I think the soft tyre surprised everyone today because it was extremely competitive and it had an extremely long life on it. I think if he'd have come in a couple of laps earlier, that's when you start to risk the ultra soft burning out before the end of the race, which is why I think they held on for as long as they did.
That's a really good point, actually. Do you think he's sort of saying clear that traffic and then rebuild that gap for a couple of laps with the soft tyre, effectively?
I think it was a possibility. I wasn't keeping an eye on the track map at the time, so I wasn't sure he was just about to run into another block of traffic and therefore it wasn't worth it. But if he had a clear enough track, that's what I would have done with it.
Yeah, I mean, am I looking at it too much, Jonty? I just felt like starting on those soft tyres, it was not his to lose, but he was possibly favourite for that win.
He certainly should have been. That's for sure. I think, again, this whole weekend's come down to timing and strategy calls by Ferrari, it feels like. Because even if they are having trouble with the traffic and when to pit him with regard to Lewis, you got to think they got to come in before they hit the traffic, or at least a couple of laps to build more gap after the track. They just weren't making any of the right calls, which is really odd.
Yeah, I don't know. It was so difficult to call it all in the race because he was completely out of sync with everybody else, wasn't he? In the top 4, he was completely out there. I was quite surprised by the pace he had on the softs. Like you were saying, Stuart, really, I don't think anybody expected that from the soft tyre. So to see it was good. It means that we got a half decent race and plenty of speculation in that respect. But it all fell apart, really, when he got behind Bottas. And I know Hungary's difficult to overtake on, but on the ultra soft tyre, the much fresher tyre, Bottas had been on his for ever, it felt like. He should have been making that move long before we got to those last 5 or 10 laps, shouldn't he?
Quite there. It was yes. I think yes, quite possibly. I think there were definitely 2 parts of that race where Bottas was in his way. The first was at the first laps, during the first stint. I don't know. I don't really know where Ferrari expected him to be after the first couple of corners. Ahead of Kimi surprised me a lot. But it became clear quite early on that Vettel on the soft tyres was faster than Hamilton on the ultra softs, or potentially faster than Hamilton on the ultra softs, but he was stuck behind Bottas. it would have been interesting to see what Vettel could have done had he got up to second place through the first couple of corners, of course, and if he could have stayed with Hamilton, and then that would have been a whole different race. Once Vettel came out of the pits and got stuck behind Bottas, yes, he should have got past him, but there seemed to be he couldn't get his tyres up to working temperature properly, or they were getting too hot. In fact, you saw him dropping out of the slipstream quite a lot. There was clearly a lot of, it was a very hot day, and it was clearly very hot behind Bottas's car.
Yeah. I noticed that on the street, watching it through, he's moving out a lot, and I was like, get behind him, go for the move. But obviously, he's got to look after his car as well, drop back a little bit, and yeah, it came at him in the end, and it did result in a moment between him and Bottas. But before I get onto that, I'm actually going to jump to the second moment between him and Ricciardo, because we've got some breaking news. Oh yes, we love breaking news. Valtteri Bottas has been given a 10-second time penalty for the incident with Daniel Ricciardo, which means he goes from 5th to 5th. Yeah, I love the way penalties work in Formula 1, I really do. So no changes to the result, but they've basically said that Bottas had a damaged front wing from an earlier incident. As the two cars approached turn 1, Ricciardo was on the outside of the turn and gave plenty of room. This compromised line, less downforce, front wing damage, Bottas locked up, hit Ricciardo. They've given Bottas the blame, but also kind of not excused him, but explained it away in a way. But, I mean, it's made no odds to the race result in the end. No big surprise there, though, really, Jonty. I mean, we'll talk about the Ricciardo one quickly, seeing as we're there. It was not a slam dunk, because he could always open that up to interpretation because of his damage and lack of downforce, but I'm not surprised by that at all.
No, it's perfectly fair. If you want to read a bit more into it, Bottas knew he had a damaged front wing. He knew he would have been losing downforce. He should have been a lot more cautious, seeing that Ricciardo's going around the outside. Maybe just brake a bit earlier, because Ricciardo was lunging from quite far out. It's entirely possible that he could have run wide. As for the penalty itself, would they have to be seen as setting a precedent? So he has still got a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision. The fact that it doesn't change the result isn't really relevant, I don't think, because he's still getting the same penalty that others have.
I mean, I sort of joke about that. I mean, he got 2 penalty points on his licence, but actually, technically speaking, he kind of did lose a place, because the team cleverly told him to let Ricciardo through. So, I mean, he probably wouldn't have been able to fight Ricciardo anyway because of damage on his car, but I suppose, really, he either would have got the penalty and lost the place to Ricciardo, or just handed it back to Ricciardo. So he kind of did, in a way, lose a position, but, I agree, there has to be something across the board. It's 10 seconds, which I'm sure Stewart will fuel some debate regarding France and Silverstone again, but it's done. It's not affected the result, I guess, in the end, but Jonty's right, isn't he? There needs to be a precedent set.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're never going to please everyone, and there's always going to be some people calling foul or conspiracy. I think that's fair enough. To be honest, I don't feel like Bottas pushed his luck too hard. I think he just underestimated how bad his understeer was going to go into that corner. If you do watch it, he's not he's not wheel to wheel with Ricciardo going into that corner, like fighting him tooth and nail despite having an injured car. He's on the inside, Ricciardo's on the outside, and then Bottas just plain doesn't turn into the corner. I still think, he should have backed off a little bit more, bearing in mind his damage. But yeah, I think precedent set. The hard thing about Formula 1 is you can give everyone the same penalty and it doesn't always affect everyone in the same way, which isn't the same for other sports, but what can you do?
It's like the stewards often say, isn't it? No 2 incidents are the same. So it's difficult. I mean, I'm not surprised by the decision. There was plenty of space there for Ricciardo, but lack of downforce. They've alluded to it in the eventual decision as well. He's always going to miss that apex, if you like, and contact. It wasn't a huge surprise when it happened, to be honest. But the Vettel Bottas incident has caused, for once, not quite so much divide as I expected. I thought everyone was going to be screaming for Vettel to get a penalty, and actually, the majority of people I've seen have kind of looked at it and gone, "Yeah, I think a racing incident is a fair way to look at that," because I don't really. Vettel could have left more space. He could have done it, but for me, as I said in the stream, that was his corner. But at the same time, as Martin Brundle always says, Bottas could have backed out of it, Jonty. So I think 50-50 is about right for that.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, personally, I probably would have backed out a little bit earlier because he knew his tyres were going. He didn't have any answer to the pace of them at that point. But it's just, it's fair to call it 50-50 racing incident, I think, because Vettel did come in a little bit tight.
Absolutely. I mean, I've looked at it a few times. I watched some of the onboards as well on the Sky coverage, and nothing changed my mind on that. Vettel, he has closed the door, but he's kind of got, to me, he's got every right to do that because that was his corner. Every time I look at it, I still think that's his corner, and Bottas is struggling, and we want to see these guys fighting, but there has to be a point, doesn't there, as a driver, Stuart, where you go, actually, no, I'm not going to win this one, so let's avoid contact and defend against the next one.
Yeah, you do. Although now, I mean, I'll be upfront. I think it is a racing instance, but I am more of the opinion that it is more towards Bottas's fault, as I think he should have backed out a little bit. But we don't really want drivers backing out all the time. I'm glad Bottas is fighting. He's in a very fighty mood this year. I think he realized early on that actually his performance is good, his car is good, his luck is bad. So he's got to fight for every single point he can grab. And no, he's not just going to let Vettel by. I think he misjudged this one and should have backed off a little bit earlier. There are a lot of people who are saying Vettel turned in on him. And I think if you look at the Vettel onboard, he sort of moves past Bottas and then Bottas brakes later. So Bottas starts to come back towards him. But at some point, as the overtaking car, you've got to take your eyes away from the mirrors and look forward and look at the corner you're about to point at. You can't keep looking backward throughout your move.
Yeah, he's not looking in that mirror at all, is he, on the footage that I've seen? So a few in chat and a great comment says, it's called racing, people. That's exactly it. It's, as much as people would love it to be a non-contact sport, there's always going to be contact somewhere, isn't there, Jonty? You've got, it's a narrow track, as Stuart said earlier, and it's so tight and it's hard to overtake. You've got to take a chance, and it will sometimes end in contact. That's racing.
Yeah, and it always will be. On the day that we get certainly a Hungarian Grand Prix with at least one little touch or tangle, I won't know what to do. I'll be shocked.
We want it as well. It gives us something to talk about when you've not had an absolute thriller of a race. But we try to stick to the race stuff on this, but I've got to bring this up. Bottas was playing a very good team game for Mercedes. He really was. But Toto Wolff called him a wingman after the race, and Bottas didn't like that, apparently asking for a meeting with Toto Wolff. That is, I get, Jonty, why Toto Wolff is saying that. Bottas did do a good job for the team today, but I personally think, and it's just my view, but I think that's a little bit disrespectful to say, certainly in public like that on TV.
It's hard to call because today that's exactly what it was. As soon as Lewis was in front and away, he was only ever going to be a wingman. And he probably was referring to that for today. But people will always see it as overall and accept that as Toto Wolff just saying, yep, he's a number 2 driver. Which is really unfair. And when people see that, even if it's not how it's meant, that's how the public is seeing it, and that's how Valtteri will see it. And I'd be a bit annoyed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it as Toto saying it that way. I think it was just for this race. But we were talking about Claire Williams before the watch along, weren't we? And what team principals need to be careful how they word things around the way the media are these days. And I just think that could have been not said or worded, or even just he played a great team game today would have been a better way to say it. But heat of the moment, emotions high. I'm sure we're all guilty of it, Stuart. We sometimes say things that we don't mean or regret or shouldn't have said.
Yeah, 100%. And when you're asked a question live, you don't always have the time to find exactly the right words for what you mean. I know exactly where Toto was coming from. It became clear that this was Lewis's race to lose, and Valtteri was in exactly the right position to protect that lead. And he did a great job at that. But I don't think Valtteri sees himself within the team as a wingman, as a number 2. I think he wants to know he's got the opportunity for victories when the cards fall his way, and he's not always going to be moving out of the way at Lewis.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we've been talking about how we feel for Valtteri this year, and some frustration there, but he didn't. They've got to protect the win from a team perspective, whether it's Hamilton or Bottas, whether it will be different with the boot on the other foot. Crofty seems to think so, but I don't know whether that will be the case. But, it's a team sport. Mercedes definitely value the Constructors' Championship, so it makes sense from their point of view. But fair result overall, do you think, Jonty, in terms of that top 3, or are you really surprised we've not got one of those red cars P1?
I'm really surprised we haven't got Vettel for P1. Yeah. Raikkonen, maybe not so much. Ferrari will always play a different strategy when they're in that situation. But it is a genuine surprise that the Ferrari just couldn't take it on the track, especially with how all the weather's fallen into place and the pace they've got on the long runs on Friday. It's very strange. And they'll be very disappointed going into the summer break. They should have had a lot more from this race.
Looking at the weekend as a whole and what we expected coming into it, I will say this as well, Stuart. Daniel Ricciardo, what could he and Verstappen have done? That pace he showed, particularly once he got into clear air, I can't believe, if somebody had gone back to Thursday and told me Red Bull wouldn't be on that podium or wouldn't be challenging for the win, I'd have been stunned. They really should have been, shouldn't they? I know things didn't go their way, but the pace was there.
Yeah, I'm incredibly surprised. This was one of their target tracks for the win. I know I think they've fallen a little bit behind Mercedes and Ferrari since the start of the year, but this is the kind of track where they should be aiming for the podium, the win, maximum points. It was raining on Saturday, which is kind of their territory as well, to get right in there, and they couldn't make the most of it. They had Ricciardo on a bizarre strategy in qualifying, which put him well out of position, and Verstappen just couldn't make the most of qualifying as it was handed to him. Ferrari as well. Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't got the win. I mean, I'm less surprised after where they were in qualifying because of the nature of this track. But again, if Vettel had managed to get himself into a better position through the pit stops, then who knows what he could have challenged for. But very surprising result. Probably quite good for the championship, as I sort of said last week, with what's looking like quite a dominant Ferrari going forwards.
Yeah, it's going down to the wire, isn't it? But I'm going to put this to you, Stuart, because me and Jonty have discussed it quite a bit, and I don't know if you can make any sense of it. Going right back to qualifying, why was Ricciardo out on the softs in Q1? I can't get my head around that. What a stupid gamble.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get my head around it either. Teams have a lot of information about how the different compound tyres work, and sometimes you see in wet conditions teams, either seeing that harder compound tyres are a bit more consistent in wet conditions. The harder compounds need to be hotter to work, so that's a bit of a gamble there. But also maybe thinking softs, ultras, much of a muchness in wet conditions, let's not waste some ultras and just get him out doing lap after lap after lap. Either way, it was shown to be way too much of a gamble, and he never actually got the pace together. And when he did try and get the pace together, he was in traffic, so he never had the opportunity to sort of get himself into the top 10, which is all he needed to do because he was out in Q2.
Yeah, I was just intrigued by what you thought, because we couldn't understand it, could we, Jonty? But we've got to move on to Verstappen, and we've talked a bit more about the winners than I thought we were going to, but that was kind of where all the action happened at the end. But Max Verstappen, team radio, I'm not going to repeat it, he was not a happy boy, completely understandably. This is getting a little bit beyond the joke now, Jonty, isn't it, for Red Bull? We had all these problems with Ricciardo, penalty after penalty, failure after failure, and Verstappen, great start, looked like he was going to be able to really take the fight to those ahead of him. Looking at Ricciardo's pace, clearly there is pace in that Red Bull this weekend, and he's let down again by Renault, and Christian Horner said afterwards he's going to let Cyril Abiteboul make up his excuses, so not happy at Red Bull, and completely understandably.
Yeah, it was very, very angry call from Max on the radio, and you can't really blame him for it. There's been a lot of this year. It started off quite promising, and then it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. The conspiracy theorists will say it's got worse since the Honda decision. I don't think it has. I think it's just the same. People will just be picking up on it. But it is really bad. I mean, there was a tweet that went out saying, from F1 Banter saying, when Christian Horner dies, he'll probably invite the Renault engineers to his funeral to lower him into the grave so they can let him down one last time, which is probably how he's feeling.
It's quite a morbid thought, but it's quite a clever tweet actually. But no, I mean, I don't really know what to say, to be honest. Yeah, I went over it in the watch long to kind of have my say on it, but I mean, there's not really anything Red Bull can do, is there? Some saying actually in the chat earlier that maybe it's not so much conspiracy theory and more to do with their packaging, overheating or anything like that, maybe from the Red Bull side. But it seems worse this year than it's been for a while.
It really does. And I think there are some things we might never know. Of course, you're given, as a sort of customer team, you're given the engine and you're given people by Renault who help you install it and, you know, make sure you put it in the car correctly and you just make sure you're not mucking about with it. But at the end of the day, Red Bull integrate the engine into their car and they change the settings on it and they have to fit it into their packaging and into the other drivable parts of their car. And there are elements there where they could make a difference to the reliability. Now, there's not a massive amount of variation in that, but there are elements where Red Bull can affect how that engine works and how it behaves. I think also what was interesting about Verstappen's outburst, which we haven't really heard from the drivers, we've heard Christian Horner moaning, we've heard Helmut Marko moaning about Renault, but Verstappen saying what he said speaks to a culture now within the team where everybody is upset with Renault and everybody's blaming Renault, which is what we've seen with McLaren Honda. And I think they've got to be a little bit careful not to blame all their problems on Renault as they are changing engine now and they don't want to miss any potential problems with their own engineering, as I think McLaren have been doing for 3 years.
Yeah, you don't want that McLaren situation where you blame Renault for the last 12 months and then get into next year and actually you've got the same problems with Honda because it's something to do with your packaging. So I totally get that. I mean, there's not a lot they can do this year now. They're going to have to kind of grin and bear it. But it goes back to, I think it was Germany when they did the changes to Ricciardo's engine. They wanted to change everything, but Renault, correct me if I'm wrong, they stopped them doing that, didn't they?
I think so. I actually can't remember all the details myself. So just to clear thing up, I don't think there's any conspiracy to be had with Renault. I don't think Renault would give them bad engines. I don't think Renault would give them bad advice. It's not in Renault's interests. And also, if it was in Cyril's interests, you would have to convince quite a lot of Renault staff members to play dirty, which I think most people would not be inclined to do. And that would be a conspiracy that'd be quite hard to keep under wraps. But I think Renault, if Renault told them not to change as many parts as they did, I think that would be in good faith, at least.
The thing is, even if they're changing engine partners at the end of the year, it's still Renault's name on everything, isn't it? And they're not going to want their name dragged through the mud. You know, oh, that Renault engine always blows up. It's not a great marketing thing, is it? So, yeah, I can't see any conspiracy there. Whether they withhold anything, I don't know. I don't think they can in the rules, can they, Jonty? They've got to give the same to Red Bull as they do for their works team and McLaren.
Yeah, everyone has to have the same spec, if possible. I'm sure there must be some little loopholes because we've only just seen Sauber and Haas have the upgraded ice this race.
Yeah.
So there obviously is some wiggle room there, which I'm not sure if Renault will be able to do that.
Yeah, I never thought about. Yeah, I might have to look into that after this one because obviously, yeah, like you say, the Ferrari were running different parts, weren't they? So, okay, I'll have a look at that one later. But we'll move away from all of those and have a look sort of through the grid and anybody else that we can really pick up on. But Pierre Gasly, I've got to say something on him. He started sixth, finished sixth, but that doesn't tell the full story. His pace today, honestly, Jonty, stunned me. We said pre-race, didn't we? We thought him and Hartley would just fall backwards and be lucky to grab 10th place. He was consistently quicker than Kevin Magnussen behind him and was a comfortable P6.
Yeah, stunning drive. Definitely I would be picking for driver of the day because he's been able to keep the pace high enough to keep what are clearly faster cars behind. The only difference is maybe if Max hadn't gone out, he would have been coming in 7th. Other than that, it's a stunning drive.
It just goes to show that obviously not so much of a power circuit around Hungary, I suppose, Stuart, but there is some pace in that Toro Rosso, and it also highlights how good Gasly's been. I think he's surprised people with how good he's been this season as well.
Yeah, he really has. I think you have to be paying attention to have noticed him and to have valued him, which I'm sure people around the paddock do, but he's a little bit invisible on TV streams and media. So I'm glad, and again, in this race, actually, we didn't really see him. On Twitter, we were very much noticing that he was still 5th, still 6th. So I would like to see him focused on more in the coverage. But yeah, solid race from him, doing great with the package he's got. That Toro Rosso, I think, is a neat little car, and the Honda engine is coming on reasonably well. It's probably still behind Renault, although reliability-wise, maybe not. Yeah, I think they were speaking to Gasly through the weekend about him in competition with Leclerc for that Ferrari seat, and he was being quite modest about it.
He surprised me, and Toro Rosso have as a whole. I mean, Honda's performance in pre-season was shocking. Nobody expected him to be as good as that and reliable as that, although they did get through some power units as it turned out in the end. But they've surprised me this year, and it's good foundations for Red Bull for next year. But also, talking about surprises this year, Kevin Magnussen, once again, P7, stayed out of trouble, no dodgy arguments and quotes after the race, which was nice to hear. Solid drive again from him, Jonty. He's surprised us this year, but finally delivering on that potential. Another good weekend.
Yeah, nice to see that he wasn't getting... Well, not nice to see he wasn't getting involved in any scraps, but he wasn't getting involved in any controversial or risky scraps. Just keeping his pace up. And he was another one who basically had a race on his own. Just carrying on doing his own thing and getting the results out of it. But this is one of the reasons why I usually dislike Hungary. Because you'll get a few fights, but everyone else will just be running in their own race.
Yeah, it's not... Sometimes delivers, but not always, does it? But I think one team this weekend, Jonty, that are going to be very disappointed with how it ended up is Renault. I mean, Carlos Sainz qualified 5th. There was really good pace in that Renault during practice, from what I remember. They were good in the wet, which obviously didn't help them today, but they were good yesterday. And P9 for Carlos Sainz and 12th for Hülkenberg. I just really expected more from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sainz is a very, very disappointing performance. Starting 5th and just tumbled and never came back from it. No idea why that is.
I don't know if you've seen anything, Stuart, on social media or anything that might explain why Renault was so off the pace today, because I thought Sainz was on for 5th or 6th place.
Yeah, it was a very strange, kind of the opposite of McLaren in the strategy they took to this race, whereas McLaren decided they'll stick for a long stint, a very long stint as it happened, and wait for everyone to pit around them and then try and get track position. Renault pitted pretty early, as far as I remember. Let's see here at the strategy. Yeah, Sainz pit on lap 25, Hülkenberg on lap 23. Hülkenberg went on a sort of medium-length stint on the medium tyre through the middle of the race, which was really weird, and that might be explained why he dropped quite a number of places. It was a very strange weekend from them. They got gifted a great grid position and then weren't really paying attention to the race that was happening around them when they planned their pit stops.
It's a shame because they were on for some really good points this weekend, and a team as well, sticking with Renault power again, who I think will be quite happy. McLaren, Fernando Alonso P8, but I really feel for Stoffel Van Dorn. Yesterday he was poor. There's no denying that. He's been very disappointing this year versus what I expected him to deliver. And he gets himself up to P9 from really low on the grid. Strategy works out for him, racing well. 2-3 seconds off his teammate, comfortably in 9th place. And it's reliability that lets him down, Jonty. And you know, that can't reflect on him in terms of any decision McLaren make over the summer, but it kind of felt, I just felt for him, and I'm wondering if that might be it for him.
Yeah, it was very unlucky. That seems to be a little thing with him. When he is doing well, that's when the bad luck hits. When he's doing poorly, it's usually his own mistake or just something out of their control in the race. When he is doing well, that's when the bad luck comes in, and it's very unfortunate. No one should be negative regarding his future, use it based on that. But unfortunately, a lot of people very high up tend to just look at the numbers, and all they'll see is DNF.
With everything around Force India as well, things are going to shift this summer, aren't they? That's the other thing that worries me a little bit for him.
Yeah, there's going to be I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least 3, maybe 4 drivers in different seats by the time we get to Belgium.
That'd be huge. That'd be huge for the rest of the season. It'd be a shame for Van Dorn. I know he's not been brilliant this year, but he has had more than his fair share of bad luck. And I think we mentioned it last week, didn't we, Stuart? People keep forgetting his teammate's Fernando Alonso. It's, you know, he's beaten, with respect, much better drivers than Stoffel Van Dorn down the years.
Yep, it's true. And it's really hard to get the measure of Van Dorn. But we're in a prime situation at the moment where there's a lot of great young drivers and a lot more great young drivers waiting to come in to F1. So if you're in a second seat and you're not making your mark weekend after weekend, you're at risk. And that's kind of just the way it is. And it is a big shame because we don't have a lot of Belgian drivers. And I think Van Dorn in a different team could have shone.
Yeah, is he? You've mentioned there about the youngsters. It may be a conversation for another stream one day, but just sort of quickly on it. Do you think he might end up being another one of those drivers that come through that are possibly wrong place at the wrong time because of all that talent shining in the lower series?
I mean, yes, it could be. He might have to sort of shift sideways or drop down again and big himself up to come back up. I think that's happened to Grosjean, didn't it? Grosjean was in Renault for a bit and then dropped out and then came back and was able to sort of shine a bit more, although he is the only driver who got a race ban. So who knows?
Yeah, Grosjean's an odd one. His career is very weird, but he's all right. But yeah, I do feel for Van Dorn today. And just in general, everybody knows I quite like him and I do rate him quite highly, but sort of based off of how he entered Formula One and the expectations behind him, but he's not delivering. But I think that's a comp with sort of race debrief here and wandering off onto driver market talk, silly season. It kind of grabs you, doesn't it, this time of year? But just looking through the order, a mention on Force India, we kind of have to. I've not seen any updates on their situation at all, Jonty, since the race. I'm not surprised really as the other things on their mind at that point. But, you know, 13th and 14th, not brilliant. Their qualifying was poor, but in some respects, as stupid as this will sound because the Constructors' Championship is where the money is, in some ways is it kind of good that they've just sort of followed each other home, kept themselves out of the limelight and stayed out of the spotlight, if that makes sense. Not from a driver's perspective.
Yeah, but it can be sensible to just all they've done is just focused on the job and tried to ignore any of the things going on elsewhere, which is very, very sensible. And they haven't done terribly. It could have been better, yes. But they're putting in a solid performance compared to what their qualifying was.
Yeah, they just sort of followed each other home, didn't they, in the end? And I probably didn't make my point very well there, but kind of just sometimes it's better, like you say, just to get on with it and ignore what's going on. And they've done all right. And there's so much going on around that team. We've had our say quite a bit, Stuart, on this. I don't know if you want to say anything on Force India, how you feel about the situation they're in at the moment.
It's tragic, isn't it? They're a solid team. They're not having the best year this year compared to previous years, but that happens. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be happening to Force India. I was bummed when it happened to Manor, but Force India, who came fourth three years in a row, have a solid Mercedes engine, a title sponsor, 2 good drivers. They should have a good foundation behind them to not fall through the cracks and into administration. I hope these backers that are lining up to sort of grab Force India are reputable and solid, and not just venture capitalists who don't really care if it collapses in the end. But yeah, I think it's just sad, really. I hope the drivers and the staff behind the team are able to survive through it, and we will forget about this in a few months' time.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you've said they're a very attractive prospect to any buyer. It's a little bit different to, say, Manor and Caterham and HRT, because they were backmarkers and weren't, they were fairly new, whereas Force India are well established in the sport because obviously they were Jordan back in Deer, but they've been well established in the sport and they've got a great team behind them, two very good drivers. If let's say Daddy Stroll doesn't come in to buy them, they can quite easily take those two drivers the rest of the season, and they're a good purchase opportunity. It's been a long day. I have no idea what I mean on that, but anybody that wants to buy a team, Force India would be a good place to go, wouldn't it, Jonty?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We frequently see lower teams change. Well, not frequently, but we have in recent times seen lower teams sort of changing hands, or at least changing name as management structures move. With obviously Manor were Marussia beforehand and Virgin before that. Caterham, Team Lotus. So things do happen like that, and teams can survive for a little while. But like you said, they're backmarket teams that are never going to be a really good prospect with regard to sponsors or any prize money that could be coming back. It's a very different thing with Force India. Like it's been said, at least 2 years, fourth in the Constructors' Championship. That's a hell of a pedigree, especially on the budget they've already been doing that on. So if someone comes in who's not just in it for the money, but also accepts the racing, that could be a big thing for them.
I hope they get. So I'm confident they will get sorted, and I really hope they do. But we'll move on from that one. We've talked a lot about them. Obviously, over the summer, as any news breaks, I'll try and bring it to you as quickly as I can. Probably go live because I love live streaming. It's the future. But Daniel Ricciardo was voted as the official driver of the day. Sorry, mods. In chat right now, who's your driver of the day? One surname. Let me know. I'm going to come to you first. Who did I come to first last one? I'll go to you first, Stuart. Who's your driver of the day?
I mean, it's hard not to give it to Gasly, isn't it? I was thinking of someone other than Gasly because I thought Jonty would say Gasly. But you got to give it to him, especially as you didn't see him really on the TV coverage all race. I think he deserves due credit for having a solid position, not getting swamped by the cars behind him, and coming home grabbing some decent points for the team. Great show.
Jonty?
Yeah, sorry everyone. I know we're agreeing, and that's not very cool. But yeah, I was going with Gasly. Not just for the fact that he kept the pace up, the fact that he kept the pace up on the Ultras for 32 laps. That is a remarkable performance. So to still come home in that P6 after going so long on the ultra soft tyres is a hell of a show. So yeah, Gasly all the way.
I'm sure you two probably feel the same. I'm not going to argue against the official decision because Daniel Ricciardo raced brilliantly today to get himself up there into fourth place. Yeah, fourth place on a track where you can't overtake. So I completely agree with that decision. But I can't look beyond Pierre Gasly. I'm sorry, everyone in chat. Not often we all agree. But I'm going to have to go with Gasly, and for all the reasons you guys have just said, just a brilliant drive all round, and in a car that I think as well, maybe part of the reason why I'm saying it, but because we expected him to go backwards and Hartley to go backwards, he's done a really good job to end up sixth. So I'm going to go with that. I'm just going to have a quick flick through chat because I can't. Nearly 900. We've had over 900 watching this stream. I can't read all of them. But Gasly, Ricciardo, Gasly, Ericsson, obviously, Ricciardo. It just looks like it is all Ricciardo, Gasly. Alonso gets a shout. Yeah, maybe. He's got lucky with retirements, didn't he? But at the end of the day, he's always there, isn't he, Fernando? So Gasly. Yeah, it just looks like everyone's going Gasly. Lewis, I think that, he controlled that race well, didn't he, Jonty? And I think Hamilton deserves a shout in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking back to the start, I'm still trying to work out whether Lewis got a really, really good start and Bottas got a decent start, or whether the Ferrari's just got a really, really bad one. Because the Ferraris have been starting very, very well. So I'm going to give Lewis benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, it was a stunning start. So, yeah, he can come in third on driver of the day.
A few people saying Magnussen as well. I think that's a good point. He deserves a shout as well in there, definitely. But as you know, I like to do my 3-word race reports, get you guys to post them on Twitter. I've had a few responses, I think. Yeah, quite a few. I can't read them all. There's 85 on there. There's no way I can read them all, but I'm going to read some of them. Starting with Jonty. Poor Jonty. He says, I missed talking. We missed you, mate. We missed you. IGP manager says, bring back Germany. Chris, I'm not going to read that actually. Feeling for Max says F1 noob. RC, rip Renault engines. Sorry for Bottas says Furlong. Let's have a scroll down a little bit further. Can't take that as 3 words because it's not technically 3 words, but really unexpected results says Ellie. Yeah, really. I'm surprised, still surprised. Nobody would have ever convinced me Mercedes were going to win this race this weekend based on practice pace. Truly trains everywhere. Okay, fair enough. Renault are terrible. Lucky boy Hamilton. Controversial. Off on holidays, says Kelly Bone. Absolutely. Haas double points. They're looking good, Haas, this year. Really surprised by them. Engineers over drivers. It's a fair point. Bottas Maldonado confirmed. I was waiting for that. Kimi needs vodka. A few more saying Bottas new Maldonado. Bad boy Bottas. Can't follow closer. 10-lap race. Yeah. No further action. Yeah, loads in here, giving Bottas quite a bit of stick. People are not happy with it at all. Check your drinks as well, says Randomer. Very good one. I like that. So, yeah, do you? I think we've read yours, John. Did you want to adjust that? Are you quite happy with your 3-word race report?
Yeah. I enjoyed doing that last week. But next one's Belgium, so we can really get on it.
Channel 4 as well, isn't it? So we'll be in sync, hopefully. Go on then, Stuart. What's your 3-word race report? Putting you on the spot.
I've just been thinking the last 30 seconds. I'm going to go with number 2 driver. I think it's become, and I'd like to see. Well, I think Kimi and Bottas have taken on this number 2 role, and I'm really interested to see how that develops in the next races. So and I think that number 2 role was quite pivotal today.
Sorry, just seeing something from Bottas on Twitter. Some out of context news around. I have not called a meeting with the bosses for Toto saying I was the perfect wingman in the race. There is no need to. I was disappointed with my end result in the race and saw everything in a negative way for a moment. I know what he meant. That is only tweet 1 of 2. So Bottas feeling the need, another driver this weekend feeling the need to come out and defend himself because of the media. So just an interesting one there, but you can understand why it would hurt. But yeah, I've seen a few. Who was that?
What?
I just heard somebody trying to come in. If you wanted to say something, just feel free to go ahead because I'm watching Bottas's feed now intently.
Yeah, well, I've already got the second half up.
Okay.
And he would have said the same about Lewis if he'd be in the same situation and had a similar race. We are on equal terms, and I trust the team 100% on that. All good. We'll keep pushing. It'll come.
Yeah, PR person's had a little word, haven't they?
It's a very PR response, isn't it? Yeah, we'll take him on that one. Fair enough. I'm not, no Lewis Hamilton hate at all. I'm not convinced if the boot was on the other foot that would be the case. But having said that, 12 months ago, he was let through by Bottas to have a go at the Ferraris, couldn't, and let him back through. Didn't matter in the end, but if he'd lost the championship by a couple of points, then it would have been a very different story, wouldn't it? So he does play team games, but I'd have been surprised with the title fight being that close this year if the situation was the same. But we will never know. Let's hop into Q&A though, because hey, we're overrunning. What a nice surprise. So let's go into Q&A, see what we've got from you guys on the race. Just a few other 3-word race reports coming in. Funny Radio, Kimi's ace. We love Kimi. Both finished second. Yeah, some good ones in there, but I hope Ferrari comes back strong in Spa. I think Ferrari, they do look like they are the team to beat still, don't they, Stuart, very much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were faster here. They were the faster package here. They just weren't able to show it. I think Bottas was the bottle in the cap here, and I think Ferrari are going to be the fastest in Spa. Again, variable weather kind of place Spa, so we could have a bit of mix up there. Italy, very engine heavy, less downforce heavy. So yeah, I think going forwards, Ferrari are the team we've got to watch out for.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, a couple of people as well asking in chat about fastest laps. It was Ricciardo who got the fastest lap, 120.012. Vettel was the second one on a 120.056, and Raikkonen was third on a 120.292. Close lap times, actually, in the end. It just goes to show what Daniel Ricciardo could have done had things gone his way a little bit more in qualifying, or they'd not put him... I just don't get their strategy in qualifying. It's still really bothering me, but I'll get over it. I've got 4 weeks to get over it, so it's all good.
Interestingly, Hamilton's fastest lap was over a second behind Ricciardo, so who knows what he had in reserve.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It did feel like a managed race for him, to be honest. So let's have a look at a couple of questions. Would Ferrari or Merc, that would be stronger in Spa, and why? We're just saying there about the Ferrari. I think they're going to be strongest going forward. In the second half of the season, which races suits Ferrari compared to Mercedes? You'd probably... It's going to be tight on tracks like Spa, but you could, places like Singapore, Mexico, they, as Toto Wolff would say, Jonty, go against the DNA of the Mercedes, don't they? So you'd probably argue that certainly at tracks like that, Ferrari should be quicker, but then they should have won this weekend. So you just don't know this year, do we?
No, not at all. We're 3.5 years in now, so 4.5 years in, saying, oh, we're coming up to Spa and Monza, so Mercedes will dominate. Whereas all of a sudden now we're saying, yeah, Ferrari will probably win that. So things have changed a little bit. Who's to say that somewhere like Singapore isn't going to suit the Mercedes a bit more? Because they've certainly been quick here. Yes, figures indicate that the Ferrari was quicker, but it wasn't quicker when it mattered.
Eric says, do you see Haas going forward even more in development to be 4th best next year? I don't know, Stuart. I mean, they've surprised me this year, Haas. They really have. And I think the pace is there for them to be best of the rest this year. But with that Ferrari support and whatnot behind them and that power unit getting better as well, they, get a good car under their belt for next season. They could be sitting quite pretty, actually.
And I think they're already sitting quite pretty. They threw away a hell of a lot of points in the first third of the year. Let's not forget, through mistakes. And I think, I think they're 4th or 5th on pace, sitting there with sort of Renault chomping at the points behind the main lot. Second half of the year could be really good for them. They could end up 4th. They could end up 4th.
I hope so. It'd be kind of an underdog story, even though they have got that support from Ferrari and people think that, changes things. I still think that would be a nice underdog story, and we love that. So that's what we want to see. Would Red Bull Racing have more points if they had Honda this year? Probably not. I think I agree with what you were saying earlier, Stuart. I think the Honda is head and shoulders better than it was last year, but it's still behind the Renault, is kind of my feeling on that. So no, I don't think they would. But I think they're looking good for next year. If this is the baseline that Honda have got, I think Red Bull are going to be pretty happy with next season. Max says, best chassis in the midfield. Oh, that's a really good question. I need to stop asking good questions because I never know the answer. I probably Renault, I would say, Jonty.
I'd be tempted to go with Haas. They've been steadily quick on a variety of tracks, so it lends itself a bit more to being the chassis that's good.
What about you, Stuart? Who's got the best chassis in the midfield for you?
Yeah, on instinct, I got to agree with Jonty. I think Haas are there. It's the kind of question that requires a bit of analysis and just going over the tracks and seeing what the qualifying results were, what the fastest laps were, and just seeing who's got the most adaptable chassis across different types of track. But that is a very good question, and maybe something worth looking into over the summer break.
Definitely plenty of time to think about stuff like that. But this is a question I think is very relevant for today because we are about to hit the summer break. I answered it in the watch along. I'm happy to do it again. We're going to come to you two for it. Tom Simon wants to know, who do you think will win the championship now? We're at the halfway point, Jonty. Who's your favourite for the title?
Still Vettel. there's so many tracks coming up that are going to suit the Ferrari, that should suit the Ferrari better now. They've got much bigger gains to make in the second half of the season.
What about you, Stuart?
I mean, on balance, yeah, I think Vettel is more likely to win, although he's got himself a little bit far behind now in points terms. What you got to remember is you always got to throw in the variables, the randomness, the rain shower in qualifying, the accident and safety cars, which have played a large part in the narrative of this race, of this season. You know, you've had Mercedes being probably ahead of Ferrari for the first third of the year and never really being able to pull out an advantage due to upsets and incidents. And the same is sort of happening with Ferrari. So yeah, I think Vettel will win the championship, but I think it'll be a funny journey to get there.
I agree. I've been saying Vettel since January. I'm not going to back out of that now. I think they've got the better car. And I think he's got a great opportunity. The points gap, it's just been ebbing and flowing so much this year that I'm really not paying that much attention to the gap between them really until we get towards the very end of the season. So I'm pretty confident that Vettel will do it. But as I said as well in the watch along, just keep an eye on Kimi. You know, I don't think he's going to win the title and it will be a massive ask from there. But whilst Hamilton's having his issues and Mercedes are messing up their strategy and Ferrari are having their problems with Vettel, he's just there slowly plugging away, getting these podiums. He's not really in it, but he's not a million miles away from being in it, if that makes sense. So just keep an eye on Kimi. But I do think Vettel will take this one this year. But don't expect a result until the checkered flag falls in Abu Dhabi, quite frankly. It's just been one of those years, brilliant to watch and great to sit here chatting about as well. So I'm really looking forward to the second half of the season. It's going to be a good one. Just looking for another couple of questions before we disappear for this one. Slowly losing my voice, but just about hanging on. It was enjoyed the watch on. It was good fun, quite as well, I have to say. I don't know if you saw the viewers, Jonty, in the end that we had live. It was 1,800 and something, which was quite terrifying.
So we'll break 2,000 for Spa.
I hope so. It was a moment when I looked at the watching tab and I was like, okay, no pressure. But yeah, it was good fun. Enjoyed that. So do you think that Red Bull will be better in Spa? Chances are probably going to be worse, aren't they, Jonty? It's not. That is very much a power track.
Yeah, it clearly is. However, keep going back to it, Canada, they were extremely quick, also in a straight line, because they can trim so much more out of their wings and still get it from the floor, barge boards, the aero, the chassis even. So they could surprise them. Maybe not for Spa, but certainly for Monza.
Could throw Austria in there as well as a surprise because they weren't expecting to go well at all, were they? And they won it. I know they got lucky with, Mercedes retirements, but they still beat the Ferraris to do it.
Yeah, exactly. They've been able to pull out some good top speeds. Not everywhere, but there are a few ones where you've got the really long straights. It just serves them right towards the end.
I mean, downforce is important at Spa, isn't it, Stuart? But when you've got that long Kemmel straight, you've got that final sector, that is all power.
Yeah, the question is whether they can just set up their car nicely for both. I mean, Spa and Monza are both coming off power circuits with very, very different demands of the car. A lot of downforce needed at Spa because there's so many not quite flat out corners there. Like Red Bull have the potential to do really well in qualifying and then get monstered up on every straight in the race.
Spa is one of the... Oh, no, don't say that, Sean. You said that about Canada. Don't say that. I hate Spa. It's going to be a terrible race. It'll be awful. Every year. That's, yeah. I think I've already gone and jinxed it. But yeah, I do look forward to Spa every year. It's one of those races. A lot of people's favourite on the calendar as well, Jonty, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's one of the oldest and best tracks that there is in the world, in my opinion. Just the gradient changes, the difference in the types of corners. It's got everything. That's why people love it so much. And when you go there, you can see so much. It's one of those tracks that's really good to actually go and watch on.
I've picked the last two questions for the stream. That I want to answer very quickly before we go. So thank you to everyone that submitted them. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of time over the summer break to ask us lots of questions. So if I don't get to, I do apologise. But Max wants to know if I play the F1 games from Codemasters. Not much at the moment because obviously the channel's kind of taken over, but I will be playing the new one. So put it to you two. Stuart, are you going to be playing that game when it comes out? It looks pretty good, actually, to be fair.
It is my intention to. I haven't played 2017 at all. I played 2016. I got very, very busy, and it was just I was finding it hard time to. Yeah, I should be doing F1 2018, and I probably can say this. Hopefully, maybe doing a video about it. I'm just in chats with Codemasters at the moment, so fingers crossed.
Awesome. That sounds. See, if I do anything on the channel, it'll just be some terrible, awful review thing. If anybody's been around on the channel long enough, they'll remember the failed attempt at a career mode in F1 2017. That was just embarrassing, but it was a laugh. What about you, Jonty? Are you going for the game when it comes out?
I'll certainly be trying to. Just have to see how the funds are. But it could be fun if we did a tandem career mode.
Are the co-op ones? Do they still do those?
I don't know if they've still got the options or not. But failing that, we could just race online a lot with all of these people, which would be a laugh.
Yeah, get on over to Discord and we'll try and do some lobbies over there, because if we don't do it for the channel, it'll just be a laugh to get some voice chat and well, watch me probably crash into you all because I'm terrible. But yeah, and the final question I want to ask, and the reason I want to ask this is because we answer questions like this a lot, Jonty, but I want to put Stuart on the spot with it because I'm just that generous. Nation Goering says, if you had your way, which would you choose as the last track of the season?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to choose a very obvious answer. I think when they put Brazil as the last track of the season, it has always been phenomenal because there's so much random weather. The track's pretty good for overtaking and mixing up strategies. It's always a lot of fun. The atmosphere is incredible. It's a shame that money has kind of taken it away and put it onto Abu Dhabi. But Brazil has always been a great last race. I always used to like. We had Suzuka as the last race of the season while I was getting into F1, but Brazil has really been an absolutely stunning final race.
Yeah, it's a lottery as well, isn't it? As we've seen so many times, so it throws up so many variables, and it's great fun. But Abu Dhabi paid the big bucks to get it, and we don't always get good. I say always. I don't think we ever really get good races there. But I'd go Brazil. I've always said that, and I seem to think you're the same, aren't you, Jonty?
Yeah, it's a question that's come up before in streams, and I think we've always agreed on the last one. It's 80% Brazil, but if not, 20% Suzuka.
Yeah, I was going to say, if not Brazil, it would have to be Suzuka. More for nostalgia than anything, but also for those drives like Kimi. Oh, that drive, that comeback. Sorry, just having a moment. But yeah.
Or maybe even Adelaide if they decide to get rid of Melbourne after this year's race. Adelaide was good.
It'd be interesting to see how the modern F1 cars cope with Adelaide.
There's a few like that I'd love to see them around Imola and places like that. Yes, I said Imola again on the stream, and talk of a Dutch Grand Prix possibly happening as well. So Boris Jefferson says Skegness, that's just up road from me. So that'll do. Yeah, anything around Lincolnshire. I think we've got an RAF base being sold off, so if they want to turn that into a racetrack, that would be awesome. Never going to happen, but yeah. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me on this one. Random thing to end on there. A bit of a RAF chat for some reason. But brilliant to have you on again, Stuart. Really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll get you on again. Viewers seem to love it, and it's great to just chat about races on streams.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I'm sure I'll come back if I'm welcome here. Looking forward to the break, though.
Yeah, I saw you tweet the other day. Just knuckle down. 4 weeks without F1. Love the sport, but it's just nice to get a few days away from it, or a few weeks, especially with that triple header. But thank you very much, mate. And of course, thank you again, as ever, Jonty, for joining me, mate. And lots coming up over the summer break. I nearly said the winter break, the summer break. So yeah, it's not the last I've heard from us.
Oh, no, absolutely not. We'll have plenty to talk about over the summer break. I'm sure we can come up with something special for a Sunday or maybe a couple of Wednesdays. Just keep things going. Everyone likes to talk about it all the time.
Yep, absolutely. We'll sort something out for the summer definitely. But thank you very much, guys, and I'll talk to you again shortly, I'd imagine.
Yep, goodbye.
Thanks again to Jonty and to Chamber for that one. Thank you for tuning in as well. It's been a crazy day of streaming, lots of it. Thanks again to everyone that's turned out for the watch along and for everyone that's turned up for this as well. It's been absolutely brilliant and thoroughly enjoyed it as ever. It's been a massive day for the channel as well. I think the biggest in terms of at least subscriber growth and possibly in views as well. So thank you very much. If you are new, don't forget to hit that subscription button and notification bell and thumbs up, and you know what YouTubers ask you to do, all that kind of thing. In terms of the summer break, I'll pop something a little bit more definitive on Twitter, but we've still got plenty coming up. Effectively, if you were with us through the winter, you'll know what I mean by this, but we're going to go back to the winter schedule. Tomorrow there will be a review of the Hungarian Grand Prix, but then we're going to have videos Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and then the live stream on a Sunday. We might throw a couple of midweek live streams in there as well, just maybe Q&As and things, and have a good chat with you all. But lots coming up over the summer. We're going to have you covered. Half-term reports, title talk, everything like that. Everything you expect from the halfway point. And of course, we will be back with a packed weekend of streaming and action for the Belgian Grand Prix in 4 weeks' time. It will fly by, I promise. It always does. We'll do our best to entertain you in that time. Once again, thank you to everybody who's tuned in so far this season as well, and to everyone for joining us since the channel got going. It's been a brilliant year, but it's time now to enjoy a bit of off time, but well, for F1, not for me. You can follow me, of course, on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and to Discord are all in the description down below. Make sure you join us on Discord, because I'll be a lot more active on there over the summer break than I have been of late. Same with social media, and that'll be awesome. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.